Hello and welcome along to this special edition of the Today's Conveyancer podcast. I'm joined today by Managing Director of Convey Law and Chairman at the Conveyancing Foundation, Lloyd Davies, and we're going to be talking about the Chancellor's decision to cut stamp duty. Thanks very much indeed for joining, Lloyd.
Oh, thank you very much, David. Thank you for asking me to come along. Interesting times.
Very much so, yeah. And I've invited you particularly because I think it's fair to say, Lloyd, that you've been a vocal critic of the government's interventions with SDLT, not just this latest one, but also the most recent ones in the self-styled holiday in inverted commas. Um, what's the issue? What, in your view, is the pitfall of this latest intervention?
First of all, any sort of tax cut can only be regarded as positive, and especially within the conveyancing industry. I think we're all hugely relieved that it is a permanent cut as opposed to a holiday. I don't think anyone could take the sort of the quarterly trauma that the last holidays caused in 2021, which I know was quite horrific for all concerned. I think so. I think there is a very, very positive spin on it. I mean, my concern is that do we need it right at this very moment in time? We're already in a situation, and I think most conveyancers and estate agents would say that we're in quite a hot market at the moment, and we have been for the last couple of years. I mean, most conveyancers are struggling for capacity to take on more work and have had to limit it. For quite some time, really. So the initial concern, I guess, is that we've got now another 200,000 people potentially next year who don't have to pay stamp duty. So they will add a stimulus to an already stimulated market. I think that said, I think what we're seeing in the sort of worldwide picture and in terms of the British economy is something quite different, because obviously we've heard a lot about recession recently, and certainly, well, it's been bandied about probably for the last 2 years. But I think since the Queen's funeral, everyone's back on it again in the media, aren't they? And it's a hot topic. What's happening next? And I just wanted to sort of recap a little bit, because I'm a little bit confused as to what is happening at the moment in the market. And I'm sure I'm not so much in the market, but with sort of British politics and the Bank of England, and I'm sure everyone else is, because obviously we've got a situation where everyone's concerned about growth, but we haven't had a chance to grow, particularly over the last 2.5 years, because obviously we've had the pandemic, we've come out of that, and then obviously we've had the war in the Ukraine. As a result of the war in the Ukraine, obviously, we've had this huge inflationary fuel prices, which is affecting everyone. Now, the government have acted very well in that respect, I think, most recently, to try and cut that back and reduce that inflation. And they're talking about reducing that by 4 to 5%, aren't they? So that it does come down to roughly where they need to be.
Yeah.
The trouble we've got, I think, is with the government sort of constantly sort of looking at, re-engaging us and trying to sort of stimulate the market. That's a good thing. I think it just needs to be left alone a little bit, so that we can actually grow. I mean, I did hear last month, earlier this month, that an economist saying that we're in recession because we've had 2 bank holidays, and you kind of think, well, all right, but we should be looking a little bit longer term here. The economy hasn't had a chance to grow, right? We only came out of pandemic in March, and then obviously we've had the war and inflation and everything else. So I think given it enough time, it will grow on its own. And I think, there's market forces are there to drive us forward. But as a sideline to that, and the big sort of thing that's happening at the moment, obviously, is with the Bank of England and interest rates increasing. And that's the hoodoo, I think, that we should be concerned about, because on the one hand, you've got this, stamp duty situation, which is good and will stimulate us well into next year. But then you've got these interest rates coming in, and at the moment they're looking to, they're talking about increasing them again, aren't they? And sort of, the projections are they'll get to 3.5%, perhaps even 4% by next year. Now, that's going to have a significant impact on the housing industry, as it always does. And it seems to be contradictory because by raising interest rates, you're increasing household inflation because people have to pay that money, which means that they haven't got the money to invest and, buy what they want, to stimulate the whole economy. So we're kind of like in that situation at the moment where on the one hand, they're giving us, and then on the other, they're taking away. So I don't really understand what is going on.
There's a huge amount to unpicking all of that,
Yeah.
Lloyd. And I think it's fair to say that there is a real mixed bag in terms of what's being delivered. Let me pick up with you on transaction volumes, because that's a real indicator as to what's happening in the industry at any given time. Estate agents are reporting a fall in demand. Now, whether that's a normalization or a fall is yet to be seen. What are you seeing at the instruction side of the business? Are you seeing any dip in instructions?
No. And no, and we haven't for quite some time, and we've had to curtail instructions literally for well over 12 months. And we're very, very careful as to the numbers that we bring in, because otherwise we just can't deal with it otherwise. And I think most responsible legal practices have been doing that for quite some time. But having spoken to others in the industry, because we don't tend to see the dip at our end, it's normally the estate agents that are sort of, almost, 2 or 3, 5 months even behind, with us, with, what's happening. But again, I'm speaking to them, and they're not saying that the property market is slowing down at the moment. I think it will come, because I think with interest rates going up, affordability becomes less. So your first time buyers, great. They won't be paying stamp duty. Can they afford the mortgage? There we are. And I mean, that has traditionally been the way that the Bank of England has tried to cool house prices. House prices, I think, are high at the moment. We've seen sort of a 17%, I think, increase in
Crazy. Yeah,
property
massive.
prices over the last 2 years. And whereas you'd normally expect over that period for it to be about 10, 12%. So I think that there is going to be a natural sort of dip in house prices coming down as we see, obviously, interest rates go up, curbing demand slightly, I think. I think also in terms of properties coming on the market, I mean, obviously at the start of the year, we were very much in a situation where there wasn't enough supply. There just weren't the properties coming on. I mean, having spoken to individuals just yesterday, actually, and last week, in the estate agency world, they're not saying that to me. They're saying actually in certain pockets of the country, it's very, very high, as much as 200% more than what it was at the start of the year. And they've got, different sort of things. You've got people downsizing because of heating issues now, which is a different thing. So that's just starting to kick in, 6 months after the start of the war. You've got the landlords obviously looking to exit at certain points because there's different legislation that's been brought in there. And they're also saying that people are still in that situation where you've got, they're able to work from home. So they need to work to find the right place to live, or they need a bigger property, or they need a home office, etc. So all of those things are still working their way out. So I think even with the interest rates, and as with the added stimulus with SDLT, I think we'll still see a very hot market going into next year. There will be a seasonal cooling, as we do see every Christmas. So we've got October now to fill our boots, and then November, December, it quietens down, and it takes a little while to get going again in the new year.
The banks very quietly seemed, or seemingly very quietly, relaxed a lot of the rules around lending as well
Yeah.
in the not too recent past.
Yes.
That's going to have an impact.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think, that coupled with SDLT, and the changes that have been made, the positive changes that have been made there, I would hope will keep us moving forward. But I do think, I mean, it's inevitable. I think if interest rates continue to climb as they are, and they're not very careful in terms of how they manage that process, then, people just will not be able to afford to buy at the levels of the properties that they are, and that's as simple as it is. And that's why we may see a little bit of a quieter year next year.
There's a
I do think
possibility,
that
of
the
course.
economy overall, I think, that there is, I don't know. I mean, everyone bans the words recession around, don't they? And that's just, something quite complicated in terms of how they sort of work things out. But it does seem to be a measure on how well the property market is doing. Traditionally, if that has done well, then the economy is doing well. And it accounts for, I think, 20% of the actual economy, I think, the property market, which is quite something. So where we see that going over the course of the next sort of 12 months or so, or 18 months, regardless of any sort of recession, I think we've still got very low unemployment. I think there's, 3 jobs to any one. We've probably not got enough people of a certain sort of criteria who are able to sort of work in the jobs that we've got at the moment in this country. We haven't seen the end of, or even the impact of Brexit, probably, because we went straight into a pandemic. So, the costs of materials are higher, aren't they? So I think all of these things will have an impact. But coming behind all of that is this 300 billion that the government have sort of thrown into the economy over the last 2 years in supporting businesses and individuals with furlough and everything else. And if people have enough money, they'll spend it. I think that's the bottom line. Everyone likes to have a little cushion, but beyond that, they can't wait to spend it. And I think the economy hasn't grown because people haven't had a chance to spend it. It's as simple as that. And you look at the situation with the airline flights. People couldn't go on holiday again this year because so like you've got all this impact, and this money will ultimately come through. So if it is going to be a recession, I think it's going to be a technical recession. I think we will work our way through it, but I am the eternal optimist, Dave. So you have to take that into account as well.
You tell us about your experience of trying to run not just a conveyancing organization, but a business over this period of time. Because in the course of the discussion already, we've talked about, I don't know, 10, 12 things that are going to affect the economy over the next, or have affected the economy over the last 12 months and will continue to affect the economy. Tell us about your experience of trying to run a business during this period.
Yeah, it's been challenging, but it's also been hugely rewarding, I guess. I mean, people being able to work from home has been something of a revelation for us. We've got 170 people working for us at the moment, and only 60 of them work in the office. I think we've only got space for about 120 at the moment, so it's a good job. But what it has taught us is trust. So we do trust our employees. We measure them extremely well, but they are able to work from home, and that gives them more time, more flexibility throughout the day. So in many respects, it's been a great thing for them. It's been a great thing for the business, and everyone seems to be happy. I think they do need to come into the office every once in a while, and we do encourage that more for their well-being and perspective than anything else. Most of the people that are working in the office are trainees, and they do need that, time to be there, or they live on their own. So actually, they really do depend on the office for that sort of interaction. So it's been a rewarding time in terms of being able to be more flexible as an employer. We've increased the size of the business, so it's doubled. We've just opened a new office in Swansea as well, and we've got plans for Cardiff for next year. So, in terms of sort of allowing us to grow, it's been quite fantastic, really, which is the opposite almost of what you'd expect to have happened. The challenges have been, I think, and this would be true of every conveyancing business, is managing capacity, because that affects everything else. If you give people too much work, they can't cope with it. Clients become dissatisfied. Your workforce becomes dissatisfied. People leave, and it's just So that is the key to everything, really, and has been the biggest challenge, because all lawyers hate turning away work. They see the money, and then that's it, Dave. They just keep filling their boots, which is the wrong thing to do. And I think actually we've all grown up over the last couple of years, because we realised that we don't have to take every last case. we take the ones that we want to take with that are well paid, so we can reward our staff well, and that we can manage the whole process for the clients extremely well.
Which rather neatly leads me on to a question about fees, because a perennial issue in conveyancing. Have you increased your fees? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, it's always difficult. I think, we have a lot of long-standing relationships with introducers of business, and they have their own sort of chart as to what they want to charge. Most of them actually have increased their fees themselves because they have difficulty in allocating work. So they need to be at the top of the pile in terms of, it's gone the other way around, actually, compared to what it was. And again, that's supply and demand. There aren't enough good lawyers out there doing conveyancing, and so therefore, they're increasing. The introducers are increasing their fees so that they can get the lawyers to do their work for them. I think as well, I think we've been, very sort of structured in terms of how we charge clients. I think everyone has to actually sort of understand that they have to charge for the work that they do. And I think lawyers traditionally, especially when they're doing volume work, tend to forget that a little bit. So it's like taking a car in for an MOT, isn't it? You don't expect to have 4 new tires, so if you have to have a lease extension, then you have to pay for it, and I think, it's easier, and, if you haven't got the mechanisms in place in the office to actually manage that billing process, then chances are you're going to be losing out. But yes, we've certainly seen our fees increase, and I think there's room for more movement there again, hopefully. I think one of the biggest things that the industry has to come to terms with as well is, this no move, no fee structure, and it needs to be fault based, really. I think if people are just deciding that they're pulling out of a transaction 6 or 12 weeks in, then there has to be some repercussions as opposed to them walking away. And I mean, I think that will make people think a little bit harder before they sort of get into that sort of situation, really. So
Are you
there's a
seeing,
huge amount of loss, I think, in all legal practices in that respect.
going back to this additional demand then that's going to be created by a stamp duty cut, do you see that transaction times are going to extend from where they are? Are they going to stay where they are? Are they going to come down? I mean,
Yeah,
you've talked about
well, we
capacity as well, haven't you?
yeah, we've noticed that. So we've noticed this year, transaction timelines have gone from 16 to 20 weeks. And I think that's correct over the whole industry. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think, the industry's catching its breath. Those quarterly deadlines for SDLT were very, very good at sort of focusing everyone on on being quicker. So they did have their benefits at huge detrimental cost, I think, to well-being of everyone concerned. But without those deadlines, I think it's drifted a little bit. And I think those capacity issues then are sort of creaking because the whole industry is creaking a little bit, I think. We haven't sort of much of the industry hasn't embraced digitization, and you would think that everything, these timelines should be coming down, shouldn't you? But I think there's fundamental issues, perhaps with the process of conveyancing still that we need to address. But yeah, so yeah, timelines are still way out, and I think that everyone is finding that. So unfortunately, capacity's increased then because obviously the timelines are longer. So it doesn't help really. The faster we can get them through, the better.
So crystal ball time. And you've only got a few minutes for this, Lloyd. I know this could go on for a little while. If you were put in charge of overhauling the home moving industry, this is a big job. What's on your to-do list?
Yeah, this is really easy, Dave. I don't need a lot of time for this, right? So I think what you need is you need a digital upgrade in terms of how we operate, and there's some easy wins there in terms of exchange of contracts, how we send money on the day of completion or the day before completion, digital signatures, etc. And I think all of those things could come in very quickly. You need one protocol across, solicitors, licensed conveyancers, etc. So we're all operating to the same standards. The upfront provision of information at the point of marketing is critical. They had that right in HIPS. We found now, even with a digital platform for onboarding clients, they still take 3 weeks to do it. So whether you send it out in the post or not, the only difference is that you're saving the postal time. They still take 3 weeks to get all of the information together. And of course, that adds 3 weeks on because we don't send it out until the point of sale as opposed to the point of marketing. So there is definitely some time saving to be made there. I have issued a paper as well on vendor disclosure because at the moment, with caveat emptor, buyer beware, the seller solicitor throws the information at the purchaser solicitor without regard for whether or not all of the information is there, etc. And I think if there was greater emphasis and ownership on behalf of the seller, and that could be a regulated ownership, that if they have to send the correct documentations or they have to identify the documentation that was going to be relevant as a result of the inquiries that have been raised to the client, etc., at the point that they're issuing the contract, and look for that information, because half of our jobs as conveyancers is actually finding information at the moment still. So I think if there was greater emphasis on the vendor, the seller's solicitor or legal representative at that point, I think that again would identify issues that we could all deal with far quicker, reducing transaction times. And I think the rest then is literally about responsible leadership, I guess, which I think we are kind of learning. I think, with capacities, with fees, etc., and not giving people too much work. Staff well-being, I think we've all done a huge amount of work in that respect, and thank you for your hard work with today's conveyancer and supporting the Be Kind We Care initiative. And I think that's brought those things to the fore as well. So again, I think that is something that I think we need to keep on building on, really, as responsible employers and responsible individuals. So there you go. In a nutshell, that's it, Dave.
Not too much to do then.
No. A couple of weeks' work, I would imagine.
I think it's fair to say that there's a fair amount to unpick in the discussion that we've had today. Clearly, there's a giveth and a taketh away element to what the government have done in the last few days, and it remains to be seen what the impact of that is going to be on the industry. The consensus, from my point of view, seems to be that it will either keep demand as it is, which is still reasonably high, or it will increase it. And in fact, in the hour after the announcement, Rightmove reported a 10% increase in traffic to the website, which is an astonishing figure. So nobody quite knows what's going to happen, but as you've said in your commentary, it's overstimulating an already stimulated market, which, as you say, could very well end up with us in a situation where we're doing a lot of transaction again. We've tried to record this reasonably close to the deadline, so hopefully we've captured some of the sentiment around the industry, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time and joining me today, Lloyd. Thank you.
No problem at all. Been an absolute pleasure as always, David.